If you are new to sixes and have not seen the first 2 episodes, I recommend watching those before continuing. Hopefully by now you've had the chance to actually play a few games of sixes, but if you haven't, I encourage you to go join a team, or at the very least find an active PUG server. If you do have experience playing sixes and you've tried to sack, you'll likely know that sacks are not always successful. In my experience, sacking is the most difficult part of a roamer's responsibility. Today, I hope to give you the tools to maximize your success rate while sacking. I should also mention that a sack's chance of success is not solely dependent on the roamer. In modern sixes, a team needs to support their sacking player for the best chance of success. Years ago, teams would give their roamer a full buff, a pat on the back, and send him alone to try and force an Uber out of the other team. You can see this in the current clip. My team is entirely backed up into lobby, and nobody really supports me. Luckily for me, blue team makes a mistake here. They don't have a scout with their medic. If there was a scout here instead of the soldier, I probably would not have gotten this kill. Nowadays, good teams will do as much as they can to help their roamer when they are sacking. For example, a common strategy today is to have your pocket soldier and demo spam at the opposing team's combo while your roamer is bombing in for a sack. Take a look at this frame during my sack. You can see here that the demo is visible to the other team and he has choke trapped off. Because of this invaluable distraction, blue team is focused on avoiding the demo spam and clearing traps, so they do not notice my incoming bomb. Another common strategy is to have your pocket soldier fake bomb to draw eyes, and then have your roamer bomb a second or two afterwards. This clip is a great example of combining the two strategies together. Notice how red team's soldier begins the bomb but fades away to sewer. Then the second soldier commits for the sack. Right after he bombs in, the pocket and demo support him with spam, and as soon as the roamer dies, they immediately decommit from second. Lastly, you can also send a 2-man sack or even off-class to spy or sniper. You need to keep in mind that off-classing a sniper and spy are a lot riskier than a typical sack. Really, the big reason that going to either sniper or spy is such a big risk is because if your team loses another player and the other team knows that you have a spy or a sniper, you're essentially down 2 players because spy and sniper are a lot less useful in combat in most situations. Additionally, going spy too often will cause the other team to start to expect you, and you are less effective when they are turning around and actually being spy aware. Also keep in mind that sniper is very map dependent, so on a map like Gullywash, sniper maybe is a decent choice, but on a map like Sunshine, sniper is great. I personally don't recommend off-classing too much, since it is better for you to get more comfortable sacking on soldier. It is still important to remember that the option is there. I think the big takeaway from this section is that your team needs to support you during your sacks, or they are setting you up for failure. Now that we have had a word about off-classing, let's go over sacking as a roamer. There are a couple of general good practices that are going to give you a huge leg up over the opposition. Firstly, when you are sacking, you always want to bomb fast, high, or both. Most of your sack bombs will be a 2-rocket bomb, like this one on Metalworks. If you're not sure where you should be bombing, I'll be showing a bunch of common jumps later in this series. There are a couple of reasons why bombing fast and high are so important. Everybody knows that TF2 players don't look up. This means that if you're high up, you can often get the drop on your opponents. Additionally, when you are bombing either fast or high, you're a lot harder to airshot, and more importantly, you are much harder to meat shot. This segues perfectly into my next tip. Avoid scouts. In fact, you should be trying to avoid taking 1v1s or bombing in the general direction of scouts at all times. Scouts also effectively counter soldier in sixes. If you're bombing, you can get meat shot and lose all your momentum. I should note that it is sometimes impossible to avoid bombing into scouts. In this case, you should just take my advice and bomb high and fast and airstrafe as much as possible to avoid getting hit. My third tip is getting a buff before you sack. This one is especially true if your team has the initiative and is sacking first. It's always going to be better and easier for you to sack with 300 HP than it is for you to sack with 200. If you do a 2-rocket bomb with no buff, chances are you will land on the ground with at most 160 HP depending on fall damage. If you jump at 300 HP, you're going to have much more hit points to work with. In order to make this easier on your medic, you should try to take 0 damage when you know you will be sacking soon. This will mean that when you ask for a buff, you're going to get crit healed. In fact, you should be trying to maintain and track crit heals whenever your team is stalemating. Over time, I got really good at keeping track of when I had a crit heal and rotating the combo for a buff whenever possible. My next tip is timing. Oftentimes, when you are holding your second or last during a stalemate, you will be waiting for the other team to sack first since you don't want to risk being down players. As a roamer in this situation, you should be expecting the other team to sack and be prepared to counter-sack. You need to trust your team's scouts to deny the other team's sack. If you wait super long after their sack fails, the other team will be expecting you. You should try and sack right after you see the other soldier committing for the sack. Let's take a quick look at this clip for an example.
Soldier's in.
I just want to pause it here for a second. As you can see, blue team is super out of position because they were trying to support their sacker. The scouts who are responsible for denying my bombs are both looking away. The medic is standing in a very bad spot, and the demo doesn't have much loaded because he was spamming.
Choke. Where's the soldier?
He's dead. Okay, we sent a counter.
I just want to point out in this situation that the medic hit a decent surf, so if the scouts were actually positioned and ready for my bomb, I would not have gotten this kill. Here's another tip. Being patient. I have fallen victim to my own impatience more times than I can count. What do I mean by this? Sometimes when I sack, I'm lucky enough to actually have a ton of time to shoot at the medic. But instead, I mash my left click and end up missing a bunch of rockets, or only hitting one, 50 damage splash rocket. Obviously, most of the time when you are sacking, you probably only have time to shoot 2 or maybe 3 rockets, so you have to make these shots count. Also, keep in mind that more experienced medic players will try to surf your rockets. And the best way to counter this is to either direct hit them, or wait for them to jump and then shoot your rocket. If the medic is able to land a good surf, you might not be able to hit the follow-up rocket. Additionally, other teams will sometimes expect a sack and position their medic somewhere very safe. This is why I always recommend to be patient and have somebody try to spot where the medic is playing. If you're unable to reach a medic, you need to be able to adjust mid-bomb and go for a different target. Typically, a demo is going to be your next best target, but if you kill a scout or a soldier, that's still better than getting nothing. In this clip, I completely beefed my rocket jump, but I see that the demo is out of position and I'm able to get the kill on him. And now I reach my final piece of advice for this segment: know the maps. And I know this sounds really obvious, but it's really important that you know exactly where everything is in order for you to succeed. In next episode, I'm hoping to have an entire section dedicated to hiding spots and good bombs. Knowing about these spots, such as Batman on Metalworks, is going to allow you to surprise the other team when they are pushing with full advantage, or you can even use some of them to backcap. This is a good time to mention that I like to categorize sacks into 3 different categories: offensive, defensive, and counter-sacking. Offensive sacks are performed when both teams have the same Uber count. Defensive sacks are what I mentioned in last episode. Your team has a disadvantage and your combo is positioned to be ready to leave the point. Knowing hiding spots is going to help you the most during these defensive situations. Since you don't have to bomb towards the other team, you can wait for them to come to you. Now that you understand the fundamentals of sacking, let's talk about when you should do it. My rule of thumb is that you should really only sack offensively when you're stalemating and when your team has what I call the initiative. This is when your team is holding either mid or the other team second and you have all 6 players up. In this case, you should be the first team to sack since the other team does not want to take the risk of sending a sack. This is because if they are not successful, they are down a player and could lose the round if somebody else dies. Additionally, the defending team usually does not want the soldier to die since soldier has invaluable area denial. So in this case, your team will usually sack first. You should make sure to take the time to get a full buff and make sure that your team is able to support you with spam or fake bomb since you're going first and you have time to set it up. If you are holding your second or your last on even Ubers, you'll need to be more careful with your life since you need to be able to spam doorways and deny area if the other team would suddenly decide to push. In this case, you should be ready to counter sack should your opponents decide to send a sack. In order for this to be successful, you should start your counter sack as soon as you see the other team committing to a sack. You should trust your team's scouts to stop the sack, since if you wait too long, the other team will be expecting you to bomb, greatly lowering your chance of success. Also, if you wait too long, the other team will get their spawner and you won't be able to counter sack anymore. In my experience, counter sacks are harder to pull off since your team will be too distracted to help you most of the time. Depending on your team's playstyle, you could be more patient to counter sack and send a 2-man sack as well. Another riskier play would be to attempt to push out after a failed sack since the other team will be down a spam class. Outside of who has the initiative, there are other times where it is appropriate to sack. For example, say your team wins a mid-fight and has 5 players up. The other team only has a soldier and a medic who are retreating to last. It is possible for you to chase them all the way to last and go for a force or a kill. Another common sack is when your team has disad and is planning to leave. In this case, you can bomb the other team's medic when they are coming through a choke point. If done right, you can force the medic and your team can retake the point with their Uberad. In this situation, knowledge of hiding spots can be useful. Otherwise, a good strategy is to time a high bomb to try and sink 2 rockets onto a medic. Just a quick side tangent, I should really say that the rules for sacking change on King of the Hill maps. Generally on King of the Hill, if it is even Ubers, you do not sack, and if it is disad and you have the point, you play to leave. But if it's disad and you don't have the point, usually the strategy is to send a 4-man sack while your medic and pocket scout build and spawn. I'll talk more about Koth in a future episode, just know now that the rules are a little bit different on King of the Hill. Lastly, some miscellaneous things I just thought about. When you're second into last, make sure that you spot for sentries first, and if you see a sentry, you need to try to coordinate with your team to spam it out. Depending on the sentry spot, your team might have to try sniper or spy, because there are some spots that are really difficult to spam out, and they're really difficult to sack into. Additionally, be aware that good medics are going to try to heal a scout in order to get scout speed when you're sacking for them, and to keep in mind that they will also try to surf your rockets and juke you by walking under your bomb instead of holding S, so you need to really be patient and pay attention to this. In the next episode, I hope to talk about the maps more in depth, as well as go over Koth playstyles. If you have any questions, suggestions, or criticisms, please feel free to leave a comment. I will be linking some other useful content regarding 6s in the description, so check those out if you want to learn more.